In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Marianne's guests are leaders in their field, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in their own work. They teach others to develop, refocus, and grow. Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. And remember, make every moment count.
Hello and welcome to Moments with Marianne. Today, my very special guest is Dr. Michael Fossel. So we've got some very interesting things to talk about. He's got an amazing new book. But before we get the cart before the horse, let's welcome Dr. Fossel. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Marianne. Pleasure to be here.
And I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, not only about your new book, and we're going to chat about that here in a minute, but just the amazing research that you've done into aging. And so, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and your background?
My background, I think I started off in psychology and then did a PhD in neurobiology at Stanford, where I used to teach neuroanatomy. Then did an MD. Wanted to get involved in aging research, but it was a bit frustrating. I couldn't quite see where to get into it. So I spent 27 years as a clinical professor of medicine. And in that time, I wrote a number of articles and books about aging. Really, for the past 20 years, my emphasis has been to suggest that we can do something about age-related diseases other than just treat the symptoms. And we're just about on the verge of being able to do that. So it's an exciting time for me.
I know you just wrote a book, and it's actually gained some great accolades in the literary world, the Telomerase Revolution. And so why don't you talk a little bit about your book and how this really can help just the layman and anybody actually.
The Telomerase Revolution, as you say, been getting a lot of great reviews. I know it's got 6 languages it's coming out in. It just came out in Australia again, or just last week. But essentially what I'm trying to do is explain to people how aging works and what we can do about it, and not in a simplified way, but in a clear way. And I'll give you an example of that. I had some of my students using this book when I was teaching a course on aging, biology of aging last year. And a couple of them came to me and said they took it home and their parents picked it up and started reading because they found it was fun to read. Well, good, it should be. Not because it was meant to be simplistic, but it was meant to be clear and easy to read. So as I say, the goal is to explain to people that aging doesn't quite work the way people think it does. We assumptions about it without looking at it. And more importantly, we can do something about age-related diseases and aging itself. And that's a new concept. I think we've been wanting to do that for thousands of years, but frankly, most of the time it's been not likely. Most we've ever been able to do really is maybe slow down aging by lowering stress and better diet and exercise. But I think we can do a good bit more than that, particularly when it comes to things like Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, and I know that you founded a company, Site, I believe is the name of it. And it's really dedicated to helping people, actually the research of Alzheimer's.
Yes, our initial goal is Alzheimer's for pretty good reasons, which is that Alzheimer's, as I think most of us are aware, is 100% fatal. If you have Alzheimer's, the only reason you don't die of it is something else gets you faster. The other is there is, frankly, no treatment for it. And you can waffle a bit, but really there's nothing that slows it substantially, certainly nothing that stops it, and absolutely nothing that reverses it till now. If I were to talk about being able to do something for your osteoarthritis, people would say, well, I can also get a knee replacement. Or for your cardiac disease, they'd come up with statins and any number of drugs. But there really is nothing for Alzheimer's. And I think we can change that and change it dramatically based on the animal data.
Now, with the research that you're doing in that, do you think it's something that we'll see within our lifetime?
I do. To put it bluntly, if we had the financial support already signed in the dotted line, and if we had the regulatory burdens, if we had our FDA clearance right now, we could treat our first human patient within 6 weeks. It's not a technical problem. It's just a matter of getting through the hoops in some sense. If all went well, of course it rarely does, we'd start our first human trial by the end of this year. But I think next year is more likely. We're working as hard as we can internally because we want to make sure if there's a delay, it's not us, it's just the nature of reality. As I say, between finance and lab problems and research and regulatory issues. But I think realistically we can get our first human trial started within the year. Within the next 12 months or so.
Oh, that's very exciting news.
Very exciting.
I've seen. I'm sorry?
Well, let me give you an example of this. The World Health Organization put out a report. Margaret Chan is the Director General, put out a report a few months ago, and she said when it came to age-related diseases that we should, quote, give up the curative model. I don't think so. She was putting an emphasis on avoiding age prejudice and having equal access to nursing care and so on, all of which are valuable. But to put that in perspective, that would be like saying, in 1950, let's give up on curing polio. Let's concentrate on making sure that nobody is prejudiced against kids with polio and that everybody has equal access to iron lungs. We don't need better iron lungs. We need cure. I think that's really true with Alzheimer's, too. We don't need better nursing care. I'm nothing against better nursing care, but we need to stop it. And I think it's far too early to just give up, call it quits, and be fatalistic. It's time to do something about it, and now we have the tools to do it.
Yeah, that is definitely exciting. I know a few people that have either they're battling the disease or they're just initially showing some signs, and so it just really is heartening to hear about how there's some progress being made in that direction, because you don't really hear a whole lot about that. You're right. You hear about, hey, we'll have. So, and I know we've kind of hopped over a bit here. I don't want to miss some important things with your book and your research. So, and we're just kind of starting from basic. How does disease develop in our bodies?
Well, it depends on the disease, obviously. Obviously, coming down with the common cold is one thing, and sickle cell anemia is another. But with aging, people, one of the things that got me intrigued about it, I was originally working with the development of the nervous system, which just awes me, absolutely flattens me. I'm just stunned by anything that complex. But at the other end of life, people always had a tendency to sort of shrug and say, what do you expect? Things rust, they fall apart, you get old, that's the way it is. And I thought, it's got to be more complex than that. There got to be something a little more sophisticated and interesting than that. And it is. So let me give you another example of that. People have this tendency to assume that we age because we just get damaged. And again, it's actually kind of the opposite. It's more a matter of we get damaged because we age. Here's an analogy. If I have a house that's been around for 100 years and it's falling apart, you could look at that and say, well, what do you expect? It got damaged. But the truth is some houses last a good deal longer than 100 years, but not because they don't get damaged, but because people continue to repair them. And what we find is that in our older bodies, it's not just that damage has accumulated. What do you expect? The roof blew off. But the people aren't maintaining it. That is, if you look down at the cellular level, the cells aren't repairing themselves as well as they did when you were 9 or 6 years old. What's interesting is that that's like sort of a how do I put this, a conscious decision. I don't mean to put it quite that way, but it's an actual change in the way the cell operates that can be changed back. What we find is that in young cells, you have one pattern of gene expression. Think of it as the orchestra playing a tune. And in the older cells, you find that they're playing a different tune, a different pattern of gene expression. And what it is, it's a tune that says, slow down the rate of repair of your cells and don't take care of that joint, and let's not take care of that nerve cell in your brain that's going to be responsible for Alzheimer's. And what's been interesting is we find we can turn that around, not only in cells, not only in tissues, but in animals. So it's long since time we began to move that to human trials and see what we can do. Here's sort of an analogy of it. One of the drugs that was most intriguing to people, and the stock market for that matter, of all things, which I found stunning, was an announcement last year by a major drug company about a monoclonal antibody that worked for Alzheimer's. And if you look at what it suggests is that at best, statistically, it might delay your Alzheimer's by a couple of months. Now, since the mean time to death from diagnosis to death is about 8 years, a couple of months is not a lot. And even then, they didn't stop it. This is like me saying you've got Ebola, your average time to death is a week, and I can give you an extra 5 hours. Well, thank you so much, but can you stop it? And what we find is that when you use that exact same kind of example and look at what happens in mice when you treat them, you reverse the problem. That is, the mice begin to act like normal mice again. Their behaviors are more normal. Their brain weights are more normal. So again, we're not dealing with, let's give you an extra couple of months in the nursing home, which, again, I have nothing against, but I think we can do better. But instead we're dealing with, let's see if we can get you out of the nursing home and have you being able to go out and play tennis again, which is a different sort of an approach.
Okay, and so how does, I know you were talking in regards to, why we age and when it comes to aging and disease. So where does telomere fit into all of this?
Well, let me first say that we probably even shouldn't call it telomere theory of aging. We should probably call it something like gene expression theory. But the name is stuck, and it's short and sweet, and that's the way life is. And I don't care in some sense what we call it. My question always has been not what's the philosophy or the mechanism. My question is, can we fix it? Kind of short and sweet. And I have to say that it's not, the telomeres are the piece at the end of your chromosomes. And there are all these odd misconceptions. One is that they unravel. No, they don't. They shorten. Two is that telomere length matters. Actually, it doesn't. It's the change in length that matters. And three, it's not really the telomeres per se that matters. It's the what it does to the way the cell acts. It's that changing pattern of gene expression. It's that having the orchestra play a different tune. They're not playing Grateful Dead. They're playing Mozart. They have a different tune they're playing. That's critical. That's what really drives the entire aging process. So I suppose you could look at it like this. A cell, perfectly normal cell, say in our knees, in my right knee right in front of me here, I stand up, I move around, one cell dies, the one next to it divides to replace it. That shortens its telomere. That changes gene expression. That makes the cell act a little less functional, act a little older, and that means it's a little less likely to be able to provide a good knee surface for me. And over decades, that's exactly what happens. Now in the lab, if you reset them, they grow much more normal chondrocytes. Well, good. That's what we should be doing rather than putting in artificial knees or dealing with just stem cells. We should just reset the cells we have and have them grow normal knees again. We'd like to see if we can do that.
Oh, that's fabulous. And I did see that you were talking about some research in regards to, you were mentioning mice, how they were going, there's a couple of different scientists that are also looking at this work. And, the mice, their brains seem to function better as a younger mouse as opposed to an aging mouse, with, and is it injections that you guys are giving them, or how's that working?
Yes, that's exactly it. It's injection. And I'd like to be facetious and say suddenly the rats can read again. But mice, or the mice. But given what mice do, they act like normal mice again. For example, if you give them a tightrope and put food on the other side, the older you and I are as mice, the less likely we're to be able to get across the other side. And that goes back to normal again when you treat them. Any number of measures, the ability to smell things that are important to mice, not to me as much, but all those things tend to come back. Even brainwave, as I say, if you take a young mouse with 100% normal mouse brainwave, which is about the same as the end of your little finger, at an old mouse, it's only got about 75%, about 3/4 of the normal brain volume, which reminds me of Alzheimer's. Similar sort of thing happens. But if you treat them, it goes back to 90% normal weight. Well, that's stunning. That's just remarkable. I didn't say it went 100%, but, we can probably do better. On the other hand, it certainly didn't just slow the brain loss. You reversed it. And it's not just extra weight. It's the mouse acts normally again. Remarkable. What a remarkable thing to try. This is the kind of thing where people's fatalism often undercuts their compassion. We get too used to the idea that you can't do something. Well, I think it was Henry Ford once said something about that. If you think you can't, you're certainly right. If you think you can, you're probably right too. But I always never believe when people say you can't do something. They may be right, but you have to find out. I remember being in high school and being told I probably wasn't smart enough to go to college. Well, about 3 or 4 degrees later, I think, I can do that.
Yeah.
But seriously, so many people get told something's impossible, and it may be. But often what makes something impossible is our wrong assumptions. And in this case, we've made assumptions that are wrong about how both Alzheimer's works and at a grander level about how aging works. And those assumptions make things impossible. Well, it's the assumption that's wrong.
Well, I've heard you say in a few of your talks that you have here how it appears that the mapping of cell aging has been completely wrong all this time.
Yeah, it really has been a misunderstanding. I mean, just looking at, for example, Alzheimer's. The idea has there are many ideas, or how to put this, there are many things that play a role in Alzheimer's. Well, let's say that it was just beta amyloid, which it isn't. Let's say it was just beta amyloid that accumulates. And there's this assumption that it just sort of accumulates over time in a passive way, and it doesn't. What's going on is that there's active recycling going on in young cells and to a lesser extent older cells, where you make beta amyloid. There are problems that occur to that beta amyloid, and you break it down. So it's continually being recycled. The problem with our brains when we get older is not that we have too much of the wrong kind of beta amyloid, but that we are no longer recycling things as fast. So again, back to the analogy of the house, the problem in a house as it falls apart is that we've gotten a little slow about going out and replacing the shingle and fixing the window and caulking the door and painting the wall and replacing the carpet. We've gotten lazy. And that's what's really going on with Alzheimer's too. It's not that simple notion of, well, bad things accumulate and you get a lot of beta amyloid and kill cells. That's naive. There's more to it than that.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course. And, and it really sounds like this has been your dedication is really towards, even though it's with aging, but really there's that whole Alzheimer's, that component that it sounds like you are extremely passionate about and just seeing about eradicating it.
I bet you if we polled all the listeners right now, we'd find the same thing that I find in any big audience, put 1,000 people in front. And if I say, how many of you have someone in your family or friend or relative, anybody, that you know that has Alzheimer's? Every hand goes up. Occasionally there are a few young people who don't, but almost everyone does. It's not that you and I have Alzheimer's, but everyone out there knows somebody who does. And you wish otherwise, but you do, whether it was your grandmother, your father, or your neighbor. We know people like that, friends. Mm-hmm. This is not an uncommon, it's certainly not an orphan disease.
No, definitely not. And, no, I have an author that I'm going to be talking to in a couple of weeks, and her spouse is actually going to be doing the interview because she's so far set in her Alzheimer's that it's not possible. And it's just heartbreaking, just brilliant minds, that that just seem to have been cut a little bit short there.
I call it the disease that steals people's souls.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I definitely would. Well, and then so for our listeners, we understand a little bit about aging. I highly recommend that our listeners purchase your book. I still can't put it down. In fact, I have a friend I'm going to be passing this on to. Son's in med school at the moment. I think he's just going to gobble it up. So
it's funny you say that, because if 20 years ago, if I talked about telomere theory of aging and how aging worked, there were a lot of people who didn't quite get it. Len Hayflick, who's a friend of mine, says that times have changed and now people do, and he's right. What I see is that if I find a 65, a 70-year-old biologist, doctor, and I say, they know nothing about me, and I say, what causes aging? They have this theory that there's nothing to do with telomeres. But if I find my typical graduate student, biology student, or intern in medicine, and again, without knowing anything about what I'm interested in, I say, what causes aging? The next 5 minutes will have the word telomere and telomerase in it every darn time. Times are changing. You probably saw the quote in my book. I think it's true. Old theories don't die, the proponents do. It's not that the theory goes away, but, times change and younger people have a new way of looking at things. And this is very much a new way of looking at things. It's not different data so much as it is a different way of looking at the data. And suddenly things fall in place. For me, 20 years ago, it was like the blind man and the elephant, and suddenly somebody's opened your eyes. And when you look at aging, there were all these theories about what caused aging, And each of them were put out by people who were reasonable and hardworking and often very intelligent and well-educated, but they all seemed to contradict one another. And I didn't think that they were all wrong. I suspected that there was some way of putting all this together, but it was hard to see it. And then again, about 20, 25 years ago, I ran into some of the early data on this, and suddenly it was like opening my eyes and seeing that you've got one elephant, and yes, it's got a tail and a trunk and a wall at the side of it and the large feet, but it's still one elephant. And I've never found anything that changes that. It now explains what's going on. So I sometimes say, and it's really true, that part of the problem with so many people who don't get aging, it's not that they're not bright, it's not that they're not hardworking, it's not that they don't know the field well, they do. But sometimes they're some of the best 20th century minds I know.
We're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been talking with Dr. Michael Fossel, extraordinary scientist working with curing Alzheimer's, not just dealing with it, but actually curing it. And he wrote The Telomerase Revolution. You do want to go pick that up at Amazon, and you can pick it up at his website, michaelfossel.com. We'll be right back.
In 2012, after returning home from Iraq and Afghanistan, Sean Gobin hiked over 2,000 miles of the Appalachian Trail. Recognizing the therapeutic effects of long-distance hiking, Sean founded Warrior Expeditions, a veteran nonprofit therapy program that supports veterans transitioning from their military service by hiking America's national scenic trails. Equipment and supplies are provided, as well as assistance with job placement. For more info or to help support these veterans, visit warriorexpeditions.org.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Are you an author looking for publicity for your book? If you're self-published or have worked through a traditional publisher, Marianne Pestana can help you get the media attention you require. Contact Marianne Pestana, literary publicist and host of Moments with Marianne, to create a winning plan of action. Marianne has helped authors become bestsellers and has received highly acclaimed media attention for her clients. Some of her work has received attention from ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS, Fox, and PBS, in addition to print and radio. She's a specialist in utilizing social media and her list of exclusive contacts to further the reach of your work. Contact MariannePestana.com to discuss the future of your work today.
Are you stuck in your creative process and hitting a roadblock at every turn? Book an appointment with creativity coach Katie Fowler to turn your art and life around. Katie is an award-winning artist, highly sought-after creativity coach, speaker, TV personality, and best-selling author of An Artist's Journey Through Wonderland. Katie guides people in connecting with themselves, with others, and with their own passions. Go to katiefowler.net now to begin your journey through your creative wonderland.
Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074, 630-881-1074.
Are you having an average day? Do you seem to be having more average days than great days? I'm Marina J, and I help women turn that around. If you want fast, deep transformation on the stuff that hurts you the most, visit me at marinaj.net to receive support and inspiration now, because your happiness is everything.
Are you dreading your next business trip with all of the unhealthy food choices? Well, eating healthy while on the road for business is no longer a hopeless battle. Natasha Leger, a road warrior herself, not a doctor, dietitian, or nutritionist, but a real-life business person, understands the unique stresses of business travel and has written a book to inspire us and show us how easy it is to make healthy choices while on the road. Order Travel Healthy, a road warrior's guide to eating healthy at TravelHealthyBook.com. That's TravelHealthyBook.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We have been talking with Dr. Michael Fossel. He is an amazing scientist and doctor. Wrote his new bestseller, The Telomerase Revolution, and he's really on the leading edge of curing Alzheimer's. Gosh, this is such a big deal. I mean, I think we all know somebody in one way or another that is being touched by Alzheimer's. And so I guess what we really needed was a brilliant mind, kind of like you, Dr. Fossel, to come along and figure this out.
Well, I think it's like that remark somebody made once about, when it's time to have railroads, you have railroads. It would be hard to do it 2,000 years ago. There comes a time when somebody invents the steam engine, but 3 people do it at once. It's kind of time for this. Sometimes the analogy I think of is say that you and I went back 1,000 years and we were trying to prevent smallpox, and so many people were focused on the local herbs. Well, the solution was not the local herb. It was to recognize that this young woman had cowpox, and if I took a little smear from her, put it on my skin, and scratched myself with it, I could end up avoiding getting smallpox. But most of the local healers 1,000 years ago would have thought of that as stupid because it didn't involve the typical herb or root, and they knew a great deal about herbs and roots. But that wasn't relevant. They needed to look at things a different way, and they never thought of the scab on the young lady who just finished having cowpox as having benefit. But that's kind of where we are with regard to many age-related diseases. People are still trying to figure out the next little drug to do it, the monoclonal antibody to go after beta amyloid, and they can't understand why it uniformly fails just every time, and then they put millions more into it. And it's because they're looking for the next urban route rather than looking at the young lady with cowpox and saying, I think we could work here with this.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes the answer is right in front of us, but their perspective isn't ready for the answer. It's beyond their scope.
There's a great quote. I think it's from Albert Gorgi, who got the Nobel Prize earlier last century, and he said something about what he did was not see something new, but he saw it in a new way. It's not seeing different data; it's looking at the data from a different direction. That's sometimes what it takes. It's not that we need to go out and put millions of dollars into finding the next little enzyme. Sometimes it's standing back and going, wait a minute, I think I see a better way. As I say with smallpox, it's not let's go out and find the next herb. It's that young lady never got smallpox. She takes care of cows. I wonder if cowpox it's looking at the same data but stepping back a bit and asking yourself what's going on. That's what we need to do sometimes.
Oh, definitely. So for our listeners listening into this conversation, what can we do to reverse aging or to slow it down?
In a sense, nothing for the former case, but fair amount for the latter. There's probably nothing that most of us at this moment can do to reverse aging. But to slow it down, yes. And it's none of it's very sexy. It's all stuff that your grandmother told you and that you paid no attention to, and your doctor told you and charged you for it. You didn't pay attention to them either. But it's simple stuff. It's eating right, and it's exercising, and it's avoiding stress. And as I often say, sometimes fastening your seatbelt. It can avoid sudden aging, avoiding people with loaded weapons and bad attitudes. But seriously, all the things that we know that we need to do. And I don't mean to be crazy about this, too. Sometimes I lecture on diet and do diet can do for aging and health. And I start off the picture by putting a slide of a fuzzy little, very cute animal. And I say to my class, does anybody know what this is? But they don't. I say, that's Lemmus lemmus. That's the Norwegian lemming. Most of what you know about diet and eating right tends to be lemming behavior. That is, it's the fashion of the year. This year's protein, next year it's carbohydrates, the following year it's fat. But it's not sort of basic and non-sexy. Most of what we need to do when it comes to diet, as an example, and exercise too, is fairly easy to figure out. It's not that there's a good food, bad food, but that there's a balance, and I'm sorry that's not very interesting. As we often say, one of the tricks is to eat from the outside of the grocery store, not the center aisles. Don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't have recognized as food. When it says it's yogurt and comes in a toothpaste tube, maybe that's not the best choice. But seriously, a lot of this is not all that interesting, and I'm afraid it's not all that fashionable. But that's sort of what works. I don't mean to sound old-fashioned or conservative about it, but some things are pretty basic, and they don't really take a lot of money or effort to it. And again, same thing with exercise. There's no one miracle exercise, but what you exercise tends to work well, and if you overdo it, you've overdone it. You decide to go out and be healthy. Starting off by trying to run 10 miles at 70 when you've never done it before is not the brightest idea. This doesn't take a lot of anything more than common sense, but most of us don't have it, so often I don't.
Well, yeah, it's so good to hear that also from a professional like you, that this is your specialty, because there's a lot of different opinions out there in regards to do this, don't do that, and it's nice to just get down to basics. It's like, okay, well, just follow these simple things that, like you were saying, it might not be that glamorous, but health doesn't have to be a glamorous thing to be sold. It could be, going out every day, doing walks, things within moderation, but still getting out there and moving around and watching what we eat. So.
And that's a good example, the walking and so forth. I mean, just exercise in general. I've seen so many people, particularly in large organizations in cities, who join a health club, but then they use the elevator every day. Well, I'm sorry, but stairs cost a lot less than health clubs. And I know you're using different muscle groups, but my point still remains the same, which is most of what we can do doesn't necessarily involve the latest scientific data. It doesn't necessarily involve paying a lot of money. Healthy food often is not very expensive, whereas sometimes the latest fad can be fairly expensive. I don't mean to oversell this either. Really good food that's fresh can cost more than bad food, but it's not as simple as just it's amount of money you spend on it or what the fashion is. It's pretty basic stuff. Now that's for slowing aging, and again, I mean that about stress too. People will talk a great deal about meditation, for example, but it's not meditation per se. It's really what it does to you, and if you can find a way not to be stressed, that's what's important, whether you call it meditation or something else. It's not the exact way you do it or where you do it or what you call it. I remember when I started practice, I used to want to recommend yoga to people who had back problems, and I couldn't say that because they regarded it as religion. And so I talk about stretching exercises. Well, it was the same thing that I was telling them to do. I just didn't call it that. No, a lot of this is pretty basic stuff.
Yeah. It makes it really easy to go ahead and you look at, like, every time we have, regardless of politics, set all that aside, anytime we have a president that goes into the White House, by the time they're done with their, second term, they look like they've aged 20 years.
Yes. Yes, you're right, Marianne. That's totally exactly it. Yeah, which is why that's one job I wouldn't have for a lot more money. I'd rather have you rip out all my molars. Oh, you're right. What? Somebody offered me a job once years ago up in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and they wanted me to be chairman of a department of medicine up there. And I said, what happened to the old chairman? And they said, well, he couldn't take the political stress. Said, neither could I. Thank you.
That's like a red flag right there.
I think so. And I don't mean to undercut what people want to do. I have a friend who went off to Harvard to become chairman of a department, a medicine department up at Harvard, and it's what he wanted to do. But I have a fair number of friends who've done things like that, and after 40 years in clinical medicine, they can't figure out why they've had a divorce, the kids don't like them, they have an ulcer, they have gray hair, they hate their job. Well, it's what you chose. I remember going off to medical school and turning to my wife and saying, if it's ever a choice between our marriage and medicine, call me and I'll be home in 15 minutes. I will make sure the patient's taken care of, but that's, that's a priority. And I don't say that to undercut medicine or to promote marriage, but it's a question of stress. It's a question of what you want in life, and that's not so easy. Often we want things that, in retrospect or without us ever knowing it, we look back and think, well, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? Fame comes to mind. It's a disaster for people.
Oh, I can completely understand. I mean, I was a national sales manager for one company, and I had people reporting to me from Hawaii to New York, and there's quite a bit of time difference there. It was 24/7. And after doing that for a few years, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm burnt. Can't do this anymore. So I can definitely understand it, and it really is about quality of life because at the end of the day, we look back on everything, and I probably won't remember all the times that I spent working late and doing that, but I really remember the human connection part and being able to connect with people.
Yeah, it's often not what you do, it's who you do it with in life that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And this is not to undercut hard work, but it should be hard work you enjoy, not hard work that stresses you. That's like saying, some people aren't stressed by a marathon. They enjoy doing it. And again, it's a physiologic stress, a stress for the bone, but it could be healthy. That's different from me going out behind you with a whip and forcing you to run a marathon. And the same with jobs. Some jobs could be very long hours and physically demanding, but it could be fun too, and in that sense, it might be low stress. And other jobs could be very physically undemanding. I remember being a teenager, and I had a job for one summer digging dishes. And the guy I worked with was an old curmudgeon, delightful man. But it was one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. Why? It was physically very demanding, but I looked forward to getting there. And I've had other jobs that were much, much less demanding physically, where you get up in the morning and you think, oh, God, why am I going? And you head home, and you think, oh, thank God I can go home. Well, that's telling you something. People some of the residents used to ask me, well, how do you know when somebody has a borderline personality? And I said, it's pretty simple. Never mind the official definitions. Somebody with a borderline personality, you know they've got it when you have to go in the room and you go, ah! And when you leave the room, you go, ah! That tells you something. Yeah? You want to be able to leave the room going, God, it's been so nice talking with you, and be able to think, I'd like to go back and talk to that person again. That's the opposite. Well, that's sort of the definition of stress in a way, too.
Well, I get it. If you feel like you're leaving, your circuits are all fried, then, might not be the thing. And, hey, I'm all for hard work. I do and have done a lot of hard work in my lifetime, and a lot of it I've enjoyed. And some of it I've just been like, wow, okay, this is probably not a good fit, So, I get it. It's interesting when people are very.
Sometimes it's hard to recognize that in the middle of it, though, or is it obvious? For some people, it isn't. I guess they're in the middle of it and they don't seem to know that they're going down the quicksand.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've had a few times like that. Where I had responsibility that was I had a certain amount of responsibility and people that I was responsible for, and so there was a certain level of dedication I had. to that. And then I got to the point where I just transitioned out. But, it took a few years on that. It wasn't immediately,
But that's part of the trick, though, is knowing that, is recognizing it. It's like those questions about, what do you want out of life? Do you want family? Do you want wealth? Do you aim? Do you want... And a lot of people, particularly young people, tend to assume they want all those things. And it's probably because they're not thinking about what those things really mean. I've known a couple of famous people who don't know who their friends are anymore. And most presidents don't have friends they haven't had for decades because everybody else seems to be sucking up. I'm thinking of a very famous I knew who I lived by as a neighbor in California, and she had no idea who her friends were. She had unfortunately become famous at age 17. But wealth can be like that too. Somebody wins the lottery and suddenly they have, quote, friends, unquote. Not so much. But seriously, what is it you do want out of life? Do you want a family? Do you want the respect of your neighbors? Does it not matter? Do you want to wear? I don't know. It's sometimes hard. It's not as hard to get those things as it is to figure out which things you want, which things you don't want, and how to balance those. What do you give up? What matters to you? That's not always easy for people. I think sometimes you have to be decades into your life before you look back and go, wait a minute, that was a mistake.
What was I thinking? Yeah. Well, there's a cost to everything. There's no, regardless if it's fame or family or fortune or whatever the deal may be. There's a cost. There's the plus, and there is a cost side to all of it. So.
Yeah, and sometimes we blindly figure it out, and then sometimes later on, right in the middle of it, we don't recognize what we're doing to ourselves. As we've already implied in this discussion, we're stressing ourselves, and we don't realize what we're doing, and that's costly. And they wonder how come they got sick.
Yeah, well, and they'll be able to see you later on, though, right?
Well, I hope so. The truth is that I'm sure that we can't cure everything. I'm sure that all of us will, one way or another, someday die. But I don't see any reason for people to die at 60 years old with Alzheimer's. I think we can do something about that. And just to give you a more practical idea of this, we're going to start probably with people with moderate Alzheimer's for our first test. And the reason is if I pick people with very, very mild Alzheimer's and I can cure it, people will say, well, probably it's the wrong diagnosis. They never had Alzheimer's anyway. On the other hand, if I take people with advanced Alzheimer's, it's going to be really hard for me to fix things. Here's kind of the analogy. If I have advanced Alzheimer's, I'm in a nursing home, I can't do anything for myself. Let's say I have 100 neurons and 90 of them are dead, 10 of them are sick. I could fix the 10 that are sick, but I can't get back the 90 that are dead. But if I've got moderate Alzheimer's and only 10 of those neurons are dead, the other 90 are just sick, I can fix the sick ones. So I'm sure that we can do a lot more for some people than others. I sometimes think of this as the Humpty Dumpty phenomena. It's once Humpty Dumpty fall off the wall, neither all the king's horses nor all the king's men can get them back together again. And I know that there are some things we can't fix, but I think there are a lot more things we can fix than we realize. So if you've got bad osteoarthritis, maybe we can fix it. But I'm sorry, once you've replaced it with an artificial joint, I can't fix that because all the cells are gone. But it's amazing what we probably can fix. If we think about vascular disease, heart disease, a lot of the animal studies in this area suggest that we can actually get back things that I would have been pessimistic about 20 years ago, whether it's dead heart muscle or lost brain function. So I know we can do better than a long ways, better than we currently are, but I know there are limits too. I don't mean to be all cheery, but it's not that we'll all live forever and be 20 years old. But I think we can live a lot better, be a lot healthier, enjoy ourselves, and be useful to ourselves and to those around us.
Well, definitely. And you're very much a pioneer in this area. I know there are other people looking at it, but from what I've seen and read on you, you're definitely a pioneer in moving this discussion forward and the science and the research forward. So I really do applaud you and commend you for your service, because it's really a service to mankind that you're doing here. You probably think of it as fun as you get in there and start playing around and try to figure things out.
I think ultimately it is. I used to be on a admissions committee in medical school, and you'd interview prospective doctors, and you'd ask them why they went to go into medicine. And you could see what was going through their brains. Every single one of them wanted to say, because I want to help people. But they thought if they said that, it would sound hokey or stupid. And so they try to come up with a clever way of saying it, or more, they fiddle with it. They try to find a better way to say that. The truth is most, not all, but most people who ended up going into medicine really did want to help people. And that's always been sort of a delight to me, and it drives people. I remember about now 10 years ago, I moved out of clinical medicine and moved into some consulting work. But my wife asked me, she said, I know in medicine one of the things you used to get, the biggest kick out of it, was having people be grateful that you did something, whatever it was. Maybe it was just holding their shoulders while they cried. But there was that human contact, and it was something that the IRS couldn't tax, but it's something you really get out of medicine. What are you doing now? And I said, well, now I'm not getting that same return from the patients, but I'm getting it from the hospitals, the doctors and nurses that I'm trying to help. So ultimately, I think that, yes, the reason that we do this is to make people's lives better. It's not simply a matter of making money or becoming famous. There's a Latin phrase, non sibi sed alius, not for ourselves but for others. And I don't mean to overstate that. I mean, all of us need to, as it were, pay the rent or the mortgage and buy our groceries and buy clothes. And there are things that matter to us that we sort of have to get by on. But beyond that, the question is, what else are you doing in your life? Is it simply a matter of, my entire life is watching the Super Bowl? Or is there something more than that? And, this is something more than that.
Definitely, most definitely. I mean, I just, thinking back on a few people that I know and have known, I mean, I really applaud the work that you're doing in this area, and I'm going to be definitely watching what you're doing. And kind of following and see how things are going along. And so when you start your clinical trials, have those started already, or they're going to start, you're saying, about a year?
Yeah, I think so. If we had, as I say, if we had right now the finances locked in and we had approval from the FDA, neither of which is true, we could be treating a first human patient in 6 weeks. It's not the techniques that are a problem. But a lot of those hurdles are appropriate. For example, if I'm looking at somebody investing in this, anybody who blindly wants to give us money is not thinking straight, because why should they believe what we're talking about? It's a risk. Likewise, when I'm looking at the FDA, the FDA would be foolish to just automatically look at it and say, sure, go. Again, they need to look at the safety and ask if it's worth it, what's the relative risk to patients, and is it believable that we can make people better? So all of those are appropriate delays in some sense. On the other hand, even as we're talking, people's Alzheimer's is progressing and people are dying. So, what's the best? To wait and be sure, or to move fast? And the answer is, it's a complex world.
Yeah. Sometimes this is my personal feeling, but it'd be nice if some of that red tape could be cut and, would allow research like this to get the proper funding that it needs, and, not all the red tape and just kind of sail through. But I understand the flip side of that as well,
Well, I feel the same way, but then I suddenly find myself feeling like I'm being a kid who just wants the world to be perfect, and not to have any war and everyone. And all of those are good ideas, but usually, when we try to step in and change things and make them better, we end up with these odd, unintended consequences that, we don't think about at first. As I say, with regard to the FDA, if we just approved everything, we'd have an awful lot of drugs out there that actually ended up making people worse or killing them. Not so easy. Life is a hard game. A lot harder than you think it is when you're 10 years old. So, still, that doesn't stop me from wishing for unicorns and rainbows. It just, I have to work out how to get those unicorns and rainbows and get them through, given the hard work involved. Not easy.
Hey, I'm still wishing for a unicorn. I get it.
Maybe one of these days we'll make one,
And I'm hoping I'll be around to see that.
You may be. I remember about 2 years ago, the BBC asked me if I thought we'd end up, being able to reverse aging, and I said, if I'm still alive at 150, I still won't be absolutely convinced it's not a placebo effect, but I think the odds will have gotten pretty high.
I don't know. I'd want that placebo then too. I'm sure a lot of people would belly up to that bar. So,
well, as long as people understand, it's not a matter of just making people live longer. It's making people live better. There was the Pew Foundation did a study about 3 years back where they went around and asked people, if you could have an extra 30 years of life, would you want it? And a shocking number of people, you might be shocked, said no, not at all. But what they were thinking was, you mean 30 more years in the nursing home? Are you out of your mind? But that's not what we're talking about, and nor is that actually possible. The kind of thing we're talking about is 30 more years or whatever more years. With you being able to play tennis and garden and wrestle on the floor with your great-great-grandkids, because now you can wrestle without your knees hurting, and being able to care for yourself and go on a vacation and do a job and enjoy life and do the same things you did when you were 30 and 40. I remember my wife saying once if we could ever do this, she wouldn't be 18 again for anything under the sun. But 40 would be fine, Yeah,
I would agree with her on that.
Yeah.
You could tell her she's 100% right. I would agree with her on that. No problem. I would not want to be 20 or 18 again for sure. But 40.
It seems so serious. You got one pimple and your life was over. By the time you get to 40 or 50 or 60, you look back and think, it's the day I'm breathing. It's a good day.
Yeah, I do know. It's kind of funny because time's just flying by. Either we're getting older or having a lot of fun. I'm not quite sure which one it is. So maybe a little bit of both.
I hope so. Otherwise, what's the point of it? Again, it's like your job. If you don't enjoy it while you're doing it, it's your life the same way. If you're having a bad life, then, what are you doing? You're not thinking about this right. You're not doing it right.
Definitely. Well, so if someone does want to invest in the research you're doing, how can they get involved or donate? Are you guys accepting donations?
Not really yet. Let me say two things. One is if they want to know more about this, I'd go ahead and read the book, The Telomerase Revolution. It seems to be clearly written. People seem to like it, and it gets the point across. And if you want to know more about the work we're doing, it's at telocyte.com, TELOCYTE. I probably get an email or two every day asking about investing. We don't have any stock. We're not interested in investing. What we're looking for right now is small potatoes from a pharmacology large pharmaceutical standpoint, but certainly bigger than you or I have in our wallets. But it takes us about $5 million to get from here to the other end of a phase 1 human trial showing we can do something about Alzheimer's. So we're looking for a venture capital group or a large investment group who wants to do this. At the moment, I think I have, pull up the actual figures. As I remember, there are some 12. Yeah, exactly. There are 12 venture capital groups that are sort of in discussions with us now, and another 10 that are thinking about it, having a call with us. Doesn't mean we'll get money from them, but that's all we need. I do keep a spreadsheet, a list of sort of a registry of people who are interested, and there will come a time when we probably sell some stock. But right now, it's just a matter of getting it going.
Mm-hmm. And with your company, do you have any interns that are working with you? People who maybe are getting their medical degrees and wanting to do this as a research? Oh, good.
Yeah, actually, we have a lot of interest in that. But right now, there are two of us who are really sort of full-time, neither of which gets any money or income at all. Myself and Peter Rayson, who's our CEO in the UK. And then there are a group of about 6 of people I think of as associates, spread over the UK, Boston, New York, Indiana, and so forth, elsewhere, that are doing a lot of the legwork for us. And then we have a contract research organization we're talking to. So we have people who are interested in helping, but the question still is, what can they do to help us? And at this point, there are specific things we need. Oh, and then there's our major collaborator in Madrid, in Spain, which is Maria Blasco and her group, the CNIO, which is one of the world's preeminent cancer institutes. They are sort of partners with us in this. So that's who we have. It's all very much in some sense a nonprofit at the moment, although sooner or later maybe we'll be able to pay some salaries.
Well, until then, you and Peter just get to lead glamorous lives, right?
not the glamorous, particularly since I'm the angel investor, which means that I'm the one paying for any bills that come in out of my own pocket. It means that
Yeah. Well, maybe kind of glamorous, maybe not 100% glamorous.
Well, it does involve occasional trips off to meet with venture capital groups, or to go off to Boston and go off to Madrid and talk with our collaborators about the gap research that we need to do for the FDA. But so it's on the whole, I'd rather stay in my garden, but he's doing.
Yeah. Well, I love everything that you're doing here, and just really want to thank you for taking the time to come and talk with us today and chat with our listeners about this great research you're doing. And I'm going to keep keeping tabs on you and seeing how else other people can get involved.
It's a remarkable time. I really do think we're going to end up showing that we can stop and largely reverse the clinical effects of Alzheimer's disease, and that's a stunning claim. And anybody who knows the science or the medicine behind it should sort of pause and scratch their heads and wonder about that. But that's what the animal data suggests, and I think we can do it.
I agree with you. I think we're living in a wonderful age where things like this is possible,
We'll soon find out. I think it is. Mary. I think we'll get there.
We'll definitely be.
I think in a generation or two, people will look back and say, if I said Alzheimer's, people will look back and say, what was that? That will happen.
Hey, wouldn't that be nice? Oh my God, that'd be so nice. That would be amazing. I think that would be a good time to live in too. So.
Sort of the way we look back on the plague or polio, we think of those as historical problems. Yeah, that would be nice. What a gift that would be.
Oh my goodness.
We'll get there.
Yep. Well, and like I said, we're going to be keeping an eye on you and seeing how things are going. And anytime you have any fabulous research that you want to share with us, we'd love to have you back on the show again. I mean, I just can't get enough of all this. So thank
Happy
you
to
so
do
much,
it. Love
Dr.
to.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fossel. I really appreciate all of your time. And,
goodbye to you, Marianne, and thank you and all your listeners.
Oh, well, definitely. And to all of our listeners out there, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. And remember, make every moment count.
Join us next time for Moments with Marianne, when host Marianne Pestana brings another inspirational gifted leader to help us grow. Tune in every second Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Moments with Marianne, when the Dream Vision 7 radio network is at 1510 a.m. Boston. Or catch Moments with Marianne every Thursday and Friday at 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. Eastern Time by going to dreamvision7radio.com. To learn how Marianne started her business from the ground up, visit mariannepestana.com. Don't miss this, and remember, make every moment count.